free ice cream sandwiches! Ah! Here you go, take one, it's all good. Phyllis, think fast! Yeah, boom! Oh, I see Angela, right? Angela, ah!
Remember when American TV execs kept raiding Britain's cupboards for sitcom ideas? Sometimes they struck gold. Other times they wound up serving reheated leftovers that no one wanted. You flooded the comments asking for more after our first video, so here's part 2. From junkyard moguls to paper pushers, these are 6 more American sitcoms that got their start across the pond. Some became classics that we can't imagine TV without, while others, well, let's just say they barely survived their own pilots. And stick around for number 1. It was America's third swing at the same British masterpiece. Third time's a charm? Not even close. Now, before we dive in, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with that one friend who always says, the British version is better. Now, let's get into the countdown with number 6, Sanford and Son, based on Steptoe and Son, NBC. A lot of you thought we forgot this one in part 1. We didn't. We saved it for part 2, you silly gooses. Because when you're talking about British imports that actually worked, this is the crown jewel. The success story that makes all those other failed adaptations weep into their tea and crumpets. So picture this. It's Britain in the 60s and they've got this show called Steptoe and Son. It ran for 4 series in black and white from 62 to 65, then after a 5-year break, because apparently even brilliant shows need a breather, 4 more series in color from 1970 to 1974. 57 episodes of Wilfrid Brambell as Albert and Harry H. Corbett as his son Harold, running a rag and bone business in London. They collected and sold junk for a living, complete with horse and cart and enough family dysfunction to power a small therapy clinic. Harold constantly called his father a dirty old man, and honestly it wasn't entirely inaccurate, while dreaming of escaping his father's clutches. But Albert's guilt trips and manipulations always reeled him back in. It was less sitcom and more family dysfunction with a laugh track, which, let's be honest, was pretty revolutionary for its time. The Brits loved it so much they made 2 feature films and still rank it among their greatest comedies of all time. Because nothing says comedy gold like generational trauma, am I right? Enter Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin in 1972. Those masterminds who looked at this depressing British masterpiece and said, you know what this needs? More Red Fox, and thank God they did. Sanford and Son transplanted the concept to Watts, Los Angeles, where Red Fox's Fred Sanford ran a junkyard with his long-suffering son Lamont, played by Demond Wilson. But here's where it gets interesting. Where Steptoe was all doom and gloom, Sanford was pure comedic chaos. Fox, drawing from his decades of stand-up experience, turned Fred into a master of the insult, the king of the comeback, and the undisputed champion of fake heart attacks.
Give me my money.
No, I said no.
No, I want my money. I said
no, Pop. Now get out of here.
Uh-oh. You went and did it.
Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you.
You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
And yes, Fox brought plenty of improvisation to those moments, mixing his comedy background with the scripted material to create something magical. Speaking of scripts, and this is really where it gets interesting, those early episodes of Sanford and Son were basically photocopies of Steptoe and Son scripts with American names penciled in. But as the show found its groove, it became something entirely different. It became less about Lamont's failed escape attempts and more about Fred Sanford being the most lovably cantankerous junk dealer in television history. And the supporting cast is a chef's kiss. LaWanda Page as Bible-thumping Aunt Esther, throwing shade and scripture with equal enthusiasm, while Whitman Mayo as Grady, bless his heart, moving at the speed of molasses, but somehow always landing the perfect reaction. Then you also had Gregory Sierra as neighbor Julio, before he moved on to Barney Miller, and even a young Pat Morita as Ah Chu, years before he'd teach us all about wax on, wax off.
Sure you won't have some, Mrs. Sanford? It's better than teriyaki, sukiyaki, kushiyaki.
No, I'll just stick with these Granny Gooseyakis.
The numbers don't lie. 6 seasons, 135 episodes, 4 years in the Nielsen Top 10, peaking at number 2, right behind All in the Family. That funky Quincy Jones theme song, The Street Beater, became as iconic as the show itself. And you can't forget about the signature catchphrase, "You big dummy." Come on, you can still hear it, can't you?
He who keep running thy lippeth will get their lippets splitted with one of these.
Critics loved comparing Fred Sanford to Archie Bunker, but here's the thing. Fred wasn't trying to climb any social ladders. He was a black working-class junk dealer whose unfiltered commentary gave America a completely different kind of anti-hero. Sure, some people argued the show played into stereotypes, but you can't argue with the impact. Sanford and Son kicked open the door for Good Times, The Jeffersons, and eventually even Martin and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Not bad for a show about a couple of junk dealers who turned America's trash into television gold. Number 5, The Office, based on The Office, NBC. 4 words that changed everything. That's what she said.
Jim?
No thanks, I'm good.
That's what she said. Pam?
My mother's coming.
That's what she said.
But let's rewind to where it all began. And no, it wasn't in Scranton, Pennsylvania. When The Office premiered on BBC Two in July of 2001, British viewers had no idea what they were witnessing. The initial ratings were so poor it nearly got cancelled, but word of mouth kept it alive. Just 2 series of 6 episodes each, plus a 2-part Christmas special in 2003. So 14 episodes total. That's it. Done. Finished. The Brits said what they needed to say and walked away like the comedic legends they are.
She scores. That doesn't matter. Whatever. Bring your boyfriend down tonight if you want.
I don't have a boyfriend.
Whatever. Oh, sorry. That is a man's game. That is, yeah.
In that brief but brilliant run, Ricky Gervais as the painfully delusional David Brent and Stephen Merchant created something completely revolutionary. No laugh track telling you when to giggle, handheld cameras that made you feel like you were actually trapped in that beige nightmare, and awkward silences so excruciating you'd check if your TV was broken. Martin Freeman as Tim Canterbury, yes, our future Bilbo Baggins, stuck behind a desk making faces at the camera. Lucy Davis as Dawn Tinsley, the receptionist whose dreams were slowly dying in real time, and Mackenzie Crook as Gareth Keenan, the most aggressively nerdy office suck-up in television history. This wasn't just comedy, this was anthropological fieldwork on the soul-crushing reality of office life. David Brent's desperate hunger for fame and respect eventually cost him his job, and that melancholy ending helped cement the UK version as one of Britain's most acclaimed comedies, winning BAFTAs, Golden Globes, a Peabody Award, and getting sold to over 80 countries. Then NBC looked at this bleak masterpiece and said, hold our beer. When the American version launched in 2005, Gervais and Merchant stayed involved as executive producers, and Greg Daniels made the pilot a near-carbon copy of the UK version. The premiere actually did well in the ratings, but the season received mixed reactions. Americans weren't quite ready for that level of uncomfortable truth about their own work lives. But then something magical happened in season 2. Steve Carell's Michael Scott transformed from cruel boss to lovably clueless man-child, sometimes even empathetic. John Krasinski and Jenna Fisher turned Jim Halpert and Pam Beesly into the will they won't they couple that made us all believe in office romance again, complete with stolen glances, that teapot Christmas gift, though Jim secretly removed his heartfelt note before giving it to her, and eventually his proposal at a gas station during a downpour that had us ugly crying.
Oh my god.
And the ensemble was pure gold. Rainn Wilson's Dwight Schrute became an unforgettable comic creation. Beat farmer, volunteer sheriff, and assistant to the regional manager with the intensity of a caffeinated German shepherd. Angela Kinsey as the uptight Angela Martin with her cats and constant disapproval. Oscar Nunez as Oscar, the long-suffering voice of reason. Leslie David Burke as Stanley Hudson, who perfected the art of not caring about anything except Pretzel Day. Phyllis Smith as the passive-aggressive Phyllis Vance, who was originally just a casting associate until they realized she was funnier than half the actors walking through the door. Mindy Kaling as Motormouth Kelly Kapoor.
So number 5 becomes number 4, number 6 becomes number 5, number 3 becomes number 2, etc., etc. And let's just say that I just sent back Love Actually, which was awesome. And they sent me Uptown Girls, which is also awesome.
BJ Novak as the opportunistic snake Ryan Howard. Ed Helms as tragically needy Andy Bernard. And Ellie Kemper as relentlessly bubbly Aaron Hannon. Meanwhile, you had Michael Schemes delivering premium-grade cringe that Americans could somehow love. The Michael Scott Paper Company fiasco, Scott's Tots, the episode so uncomfortable it spawned support groups. The man was a walking HR violation with a heart of gold. Behind the scenes, the British creator stayed involved throughout. Gervais and Merchant co-wrote episodes like The Convict. Merchant even directed Customer Survey, and Gervais made memorable cameo appearances. John Krasinski shot those opening credits, and half the best moments came from improv. This wasn't just a TV show, it was a beautiful accident that just kept getting more beautiful. By the time it wrapped in 2013, The Office had delivered 9 seasons and 201 episodes of pure comfort television. 5 Emmys, 2 SAG Awards, a Peabody, and after that 2009 Super Bowl episode, nearly 23 million viewers who suddenly cared about a paper company in northeastern Pennsylvania. But here's the kicker. The show's biggest success came after it ended. It became the most streamed show in America, racking up 57 billion minutes in 2020 alone, and that's right, I said billion with a B. Not to mention the cultural impact. It redefined the mockumentary format, influenced shows like Parks and Recreation, and launched 1,000 memes. Sure, many felt it never quite recovered after Steve Carell left in season 7.
I think we should just save the goodbyes for tomorrow, at lunch.
Oh. Okay.
And then tomorrow, I can tell you what a great boss you turned out to be. Best boss I ever had.
Though there are some people, like me, that argue those later seasons still had their moments, but it remained essential viewing right to the end. Sometimes the British spark burns bright and brief, but in Scranton, it became a bonfire that's still warming our hearts today. Number 4, Dear John, based on Dear John, NBC. Divorce isn't funny, unless you're watching Dear John. Let's face it, getting dumped via letter has to be one of the most soul-crushing ways to discover your marriage is over, but leave it to British television to find the comedy gold buried in emotional wreckage. The original Dear John aired on BBC One from 1986 to 1987. Just 14 episodes across 2 series because the Brits knew when to quit while they were ahead. Ralph Bates starred as John Lacey, a mild-mannered schoolteacher whose wife didn't just leave him, she leaves him for his best friend. Because apparently regular heartbreak wasn't devastating enough. Suddenly single, broke, and stuck in a depressing bedsit, John does what any self-respecting divorced Brit would do. He joins a support group. The 1-to-1 club became his lifeline, filled with the kind of beautifully damaged characters only British comedy could deliver. There was Belinda Lang as the ice-cold Kate, Peter Denyer as the pathetically sweet Ralph Dring, whose best friend was literally a pet terrapin, which honestly says everything you need to know about his social life. Rachel Bell played Louise, the well-meaning group leader trying to hold this mess together, and then there was Peter Blake as Kirk St. Moritz, a polyester-clad wannabe Casanova who talked a big game about his romantic conquests. But here's where it gets deliciously twisted. Kirk was actually the fantasy alter ego of Eric Morris, a timid mama's boy who couldn't order pizza without breaking into a sweat. The show played with this ambiguity brilliantly. Was Kirk real? Was Eric? Did it even matter? It was the kind of psychological mind game that made you question whether you were watching a sitcom or a very funny nervous breakdown. With its bone-dry wit and moments that made you laugh and wince simultaneously, Dear John UK became a cult hit. It proved that sometimes the best comedy comes from the worst moments in life. Then NBC took one look at this beautifully bleak masterpiece and said, we can make this funnier. Dear John US premiered in 1988 with Judd Hirsch as the newly dumped John Lacey, also courtesy of that dreaded Dear John letter. But where the British version wallowed in delicious misery, the American version cranked up the laughs and dialed down the existential dread. His 1-to-1 club was a completely different animal. Jane Carr as Louise Mercer, the nosy but lovable group founder who somehow kept everyone from completely falling apart. Isabella Hoffman as Kate McCarran, the potential love interest who gave John hope that maybe, just maybe, life after divorce wouldn't be a complete disaster. Harry Grainer as Ralph Drang, the shy toll booth collector who made social awkwardness an art form. Billy Bird as chatty retiree Bonnie who treated group therapy like her personal talk show. Tom Willett as the mysteriously silent Tom. Seriously, the man barely spoke but somehow became a fan favorite. And then there was Jerry Burns as Kirk Morris, the arrogant ladies' man whose outrageous stories and shameless bravado stole every scene he was in. He wasn't exactly a pathological liar, more like a master exaggerator and the perfect parody of every barfly blowhard who's ever cornered you with tales of his imaginary conquests. The American version traded subtle British melancholy for bigger laughs, laugh tracks, and that warm sitcom comfort food feeling. Thanks to its golden time slot right after Cheers, because apparently NBC knew how to schedule shows back then, it became a surprise hit. 4 seasons, 90 episodes, cracking the Nielsen Top 15, and even snagging Judd Hirsch a Golden Globe. Cleavon Little picked up an Emmy for a guest role as a closeted man navigating his own divorce, proving the show could handle serious moments when it needed to. But like most good things in the early 90s, it couldn't last forever. Ratings sagged, time slots shifted, and by 1992, the show quietly set its own Dear John to television. It never became iconic like The Office or culturally groundbreaking like Sanford and Son, but Dear John did something genuinely rare. It successfully crossed the Atlantic without losing its soul. The British version delivered sharp, bittersweet comedy that made you think. The American version gave viewers comfort TV laughs with just enough heartache to feel real. Not bad for a sitcom that started with the worst breakup letter ever written. Now we're going to take a quick pause before we get back to the chaos, so if you're loving this trip through British imports and their American cousins, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps YouTube know that retro TV isn't just a guilty pleasure, it's essential viewing. Now let's get back to the countdown with number 3, Men Behaving Badly, based on Men Behaving Badly, NBC. Some shows survive the Atlantic crossing, others sink faster than a pint disappearing on Friday night. Men Behaving Badly, the original British version, was basically the dictionary definition of lad culture before anyone knew what to call it. Created by Simon Nye, it premiered on ITV in 1992 as the ultimate portrait of arrested development and bad decisions. Picture this: 2 flatmates who treated adulting like an optional hobby. Martin Clunes as Gary Strang, a security sales manager whose emotional maturity peaked somewhere around age 14, constantly testing the patience of his long-suffering girlfriend Dorothy, played by Caroline Quentin, with the kind of exasperated perfection that only comes from years of dealing with man-children. Gary's flatmate situation was complicated. First, there was Harry Enfield as Dermot in Series 1, but when Enfield left to pursue other projects, probably something requiring actual pants-wearing,
Drink? I always find a gin and tonic slips down nicely this time in the evening.
Do you?
Neil Morrissey stepped in as Tony, and thank God he did, because Tony became the show's secret weapon. A goofy dreamer hopelessly obsessed with upstairs neighbor Deborah, played by Leslie Ash. The chemistry between this quartet was pure magic, like watching a very funny car crash in slow motion. But here's where the story gets interesting. After 2 series on ITV, the network dropped the show when viewing figures weren't considered sufficient. Most shows would have died right there, but instead, producer Beryl Virtue took it to BBC One in 1994, and something beautiful happened. The gloves came off. The jokes got cruder, the behavior got worse, and somehow the audience got massive. At its peak, nearly 14 million Brits were tuning in to watch Gary and Tony avoid responsibility with the dedication of professional slackers. It perfectly captured 90s British lad culture. All lager, football, juvenile pranks, and the sacred art of avoiding anything remotely resembling adult behavior. The show ran until 1998, spanning 6 series, a Christmas special, and a 3-part finale, becoming one of the UK's most beloved sitcoms of the decade. Then, NBC looked at this glorious mess and thought, we can totally do this in America. Spoiler alert, they could not. The American version premiered in 1996 with Rob Schneider as Jamie Coleman and Ron Eldard as Kevin Murphy. Justine Bateman played Kevin's girlfriend Sarah, and Dina Spivey was Brenda, the upstairs neighbor. On paper, it had everything you'd want in a buddy comedy: recognizable faces, proven source material, and NBC's marketing machine behind it. But here's where things went sideways faster than Gary Strang chasing a football. The American version was sanitized within an inch of its life. Where the British original reveled in crude, anarchic humor that made you question your life choices, the NBC version felt like it had been run through a corporate focus group and emerged wearing a sweater vest. The problem started immediately. Both Eldard and Bateman bailed after the first season, and while reports of salary disputes and creative differences with the show's direction were the official story, you have to wonder if they just looked around and realized they were trapped in a watered-down version of something that used to be brilliant. Season 2 brought in Ken Marino and Jenica Bergeri as replacements, with Spivey promoted to series regular, but it was like trying to restart a car with a dead battery. The buddy chemistry that made the original work was gone. The edginess that made it dangerous was sanitized away. The laughs, well, let's just say they were harder to find than a decent pint in Times Square. NBC produced 22 episodes in season 1, then 13 more in season 2, but only aired 6 of those second season episodes before pulling the plug in 1997. 28 episodes total made it to air, with 7 completed episodes left to gather dust in the network vault. Critics absolutely savaged it for lazy, gross-out gags that missed the point entirely.
I want the jacket. I don't care, Jamie. I don't think so. Give me the jacket, Jamie. No. You have the jacket.
Viewers tuned out faster than you could say Rob Schneider vehicle, and it quickly became another cautionary tale in the ever-growing graveyard of British sitcoms that lost their souls somewhere over the Atlantic. So, while the British men behaving badly survived cancellation to become both a cultural phenomenon and perfect snapshot of 90s lad culture, seriously, sociologists probably use it as a primary source, the American version proved that some things just don't translate. What works brilliantly in a cramped London flat with actual stakes and real consequences doesn't necessarily work when it's been corporate tested and focus grouped into primetime pablum. Number 2, Three's a Crowd, based on Robin's Nest, ABC. You'd think Three's Company had already wrung every last drop of comedy out of Jack Tripper's love life, but ABC looked at that golden goose and said, let's see if we can squeeze out one more egg. The result was Three's a Crowd. Spoiler alert, that didn't last long. But let's start with the success story, because across the pond, Robin's Nest was doing everything right. Running from 1977 to 1981, it was the natural evolution of Man About the House that British audiences actually wanted to see. Richard O'Sullivan reprised his role as Robin Tripp, now all grown up and shacked up with girlfriend Vicky Nichols, played by Tessa Wyatt. Here's where it gets interesting. They're living together above her dad's abandoned Chinese takeaway, which Robin transforms into a French bistro. Because apparently going from flatmate to restaurateur is the logical next step in British sitcom progression. Vicky's father, James, played by Tony Britton, becomes both landlord and business partner, giving him unlimited opportunities to meddle in their relationship with the kind of paternal disapproval that makes every family dinner awkward. And then there was David Kelly as Albert, the one-armed dishwasher who quietly stole every scene with the kind of deadpan delivery that made you forget he was supposed to be a supporting character. The show lasted 6 seasons, drew massive ratings, and even managed to break some taboos by portraying an unmarried couple living together, which was genuinely controversial for British TV in the 70s.
Well, he was close enough to leave him a bit of money.
Really? How much?
Well, he didn't say, he just said a bit of money.
Well, a bit could be a lot, or it could be a bit.
So, naturally, ABC looked at this success and thought, we can totally recreate this magic in America. After all, they'd struck gold remaking Man About the House into Three's Company, and if we're conveniently forgetting about the Ropers, why not go for round 3? Three's a Crowd picked up right where Three's Company left off, with John Ritter still charming audiences as Jack Tripper. This time, he's living with girlfriend Vicky Bradford, played by Mary Cadorette, while her wealthy meddling father James Bradford, Robert Mandan in full disapproving dad mode, literally bought the building where both Jack's bistro and their apartment were located, purchasing it from Jack's former boss Frank Angelino just so he could keep a closer eye on his daughter's relationship. Jack ran his bistro with sidekick E.Z. Taylor, played by Alan Campbell, and they even managed to cast Jessica Walter, yes, our future Lucille Bluth, as Vicky's equally meddling mother. On paper, it looked like a perfect translation of Robin's Nest. All the pieces were there, but in practice, it was missing everything that made the original work. Gone were the iconic dynamics that made Three's Company work. There was no Janet, no Terry, no Mr. Furley, and definitely no man pretending to be gay so he could live with 2 women misunderstandings that drove the entire premise. Instead of the clever innuendo and perfectly timed physical comedy that Ritter had mastered, Three's a Crowd leaned on broader slapstick and increasingly tired gags that felt like leftovers from a better party. And then there was the competition problem. Going up against NBC's The A-Team was like bringing a rubber chicken to a gunfight. While Jack Tripper was bumbling around his bistro, viewers were watching explosions and bullets that never actually hit anyone. It kinda wasn't fair. Side note, we covered the A-Team in detail in a previous video. We dropped the link in the description just for you if you want to check it out. Anyway, behind the scenes, even John Ritter could see the writing on the wall. When renewal time came around, he wanted a full season guarantee before committing to season 2. ABC initially renewed the show for 13 episodes, but between moderate ratings, brutal competition, and Ritter's demands, they ultimately decided to pull the plug after just 22 episodes.
I thought you didn't get jealous.
Well, I do.
Oh, yeah? How jealous?
This jealous.
Vicky, you've made me the happiest man.
Meanwhile, Robin's Nest remains fondly remembered in the UK as a worthy successor to Man About the House, proof that when you evolve a concept naturally, audiences will follow. But Three's a Crowd joined the Ropers in the failed spin-off club, though it managed to have an even shorter run than its predecessor's season and a half. And if you're wondering what happened to the original Three's Company and the Ropers, we covered their British counterparts, Man About the House and George and Mildred, back in part 1. There's a link in the description if you want to catch up on how those translations actually worked. Number 1, Payne, based on Fawlty Towers, CBS. Some shows just shouldn't be messed with. Fawlty Towers is one of them. But apparently nobody told American television executives that you can't improve on perfection, or that some things are better left alone. Or, well, you'll see. The British original aired from 1975 to 1979, just 12 episodes, every single one a perfect gem of comedic chaos. John Cleese as the eternally exasperated Basil Fawlty, a man whose rage could power a small nuclear reactor. Prunella Scales as his razor-sharp wife Sybil, who wielded sarcasm like a surgical instrument. Connie Booth as the pragmatic Polly, the only sane person in the entire hotel. And Andrew Sachs as the hapless Manuel, whose confusion was so genuine, you almost felt guilty for laughing.
I shall have to see, sir. A single?
Yeah. No, make it a double. I feel lucky today.
Each episode was a masterclass in escalating mayhem. Meticulously written, perfectly performed, and brimming with brilliant satire about class, manners, and the spectacular ways humans can make everything worse. The show was essentially a 12-episode master's course in how to lose your mind while running a hotel, and it worked because Cleese and Booth knew exactly when to stop. 12 episodes, lightning in a bottle, done. Critics and fans still rank it as the greatest British sitcom of all time, and part of its genius was the legendary restraint. They could have milked it for years, but instead, they gave us perfection and walked away like comedy legends. But American TV looked at this untouchable masterpiece and said, hold our beer, we can totally improve this. Spoiler alert, they could not. The most recent attempt came in 1999 with Payne on CBS. John Larroquette starred as hotel owner Royal Payne, which yes, is exactly the kind of on-the-nose naming that should have been a red flag from day one. JoBeth Williams played his wife Connie, Julie Benz was the naive maid Breeze, and Rick Batella stepped in as Mo, the Manuel stand-in, who deserved so much better than this mess. Where Basil Fawlty delivered volcanic rants that were equal parts terrifying and hilarious, Royal Payne served up awkward sex jokes and storylines that never found their spark. It was like watching someone try to recreate a symphony with a kazoo and a lot of enthusiasm. CBS managed to air 8 episodes before mercifully pulling the plug, though 9 were actually filmed. That one unaired episode is probably sitting in a vault somewhere, and honestly, it's safer that way. And here's where it got really painful. Payne was the 3rd failed attempt to crack this particular code. The US had already tried and failed with Snavely, starring Harvey Korman and Betty White in 1978, and crashed and burned again with Amanda's featuring B. Arthur in 1983. We covered Amanda's back in part 1, and let's just say, it didn't exactly set the bar high. 3 remakes, 3 spectacular failures. It was like someone trying to photocopy the Mona Lisa and wondering why it keeps coming out blurry. Meanwhile, John Cleese's 12 original episodes remain completely untouchable, still studied in comedy writing classes, still quoted by anyone who's ever worked in customer service, and still absolutely hilarious nearly 50 years later. They're a masterpiece of timing, writing, and knowing when to quit while you're ahead. Fawlty Towers proved that sometimes the best thing you can do with perfection is appreciate it for what it is and resist the urge to mess with it. But hey, at least we learned something valuable from these failed attempts. Some comedy is so perfectly crafted that any attempt to recreate it is like trying to catch fire with wet matches. Sometimes, the original really is irreplaceable. And there you have it. 6 more American sitcoms that borrowed a little too heavily from their British neighbors. Some became classics. Others, well, they're sitting in the Do Not Resuscitate file. So now it's your turn. Which of these American remakes do you actually think held their own, and which ones made you wish the networks had just left well enough alone? Drop your picks in the comment section below because you know we're reading them. And be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming up next. Until next time, this is Remember When.